All right, today we're tackling one of the biggest questions out there, a question that launched this massive intellectual showdown. We're going to dive deep into functionalism, a theory that was basically born from a huge clash between two giants of anthropology who looked at the exact same world and saw two completely different things. So let's start with that central puzzle, right? What in the world actually holds society together? I mean, why don't we just all fly apart into total chaos? This is the fundamental question functionalism was designed to answer. It's really a search for the invisible glue that keeps all of us connected.
Okay, to really get how functionalism tried to answer that question, you first have to understand what it was pushing back against, because in the world of big ideas, new theories are almost always a reaction to whatever came before them.
So check this out. The older theories, like one called diffusionism, were completely obsessed with history. I mean, you can think of them like cultural detectives, trying to trace every little custom or tool all the way back to where it started. And they usually assumed everything great came from one place, like ancient Egypt. But then functionalism comes along and asks this, frankly, way more interesting question. Forget where it came from. What does it do for people, right here, right now? This whole new way of looking at things was really built on a single, super powerful analogy. An idea so clear it basically unlocks the entire theory. And here it is, the core idea. Functionalism basically says that every custom, every belief, every institution, it all exists for a reason. It has a specific function. It has a job to do to keep the entire social system humming along. In this view, nothing's really random. Everything has a purpose. The big analogy here, which was really pushed by thinkers like Herbert Spencer, is to think about society as if it were a living body. You know, a body has organs, a heart, lungs, a brain, and they all have to work together for the body to survive. Well, in the same way, a society has institutions, things like family, the law, the economy. These are society's organs, and each one has a vital job that keeps the whole society alive and stable. So now let's meet the first of our intellectual heavyweights, a guy named Bronislaw Malinowski. He took this functionalist idea and really zeroed in on it, arguing that a society's main purpose isn't just to keep itself going, but to serve something way more fundamental. For Malinowski, the answer was actually pretty simple, but also really profound. Culture, he said, is just a giant toolkit. Its one and only job is to satisfy the needs of the individuals who are part of it. Every single thing, from believing in magic to having a legal system, could be traced all the way back to fulfilling some basic human need. And he broke this down into 3 levels. At the very bottom, you have our primary biological needs. Food, shelter, safety. Culture's first job is to handle that. Then, to make sure those needs are met, culture creates organized systems to deal with what he called instrumental needs, things like economic systems and social controls. And finally, on top of all that, culture has to fulfill our integrative needs, that deep human desire for meaning and connection. And it does that through stuff like religion, art, and tradition. Now, to prove his theory, Malinowski documented one of the most fascinating examples in all of anthropology, the Kula ring of the Trobriand Islands. Now, on the surface, this thing just looks like a really strange, ritualized exchange of what seem to be completely worthless trinkets. So get this, men would sail across really dangerous open seas just to exchange these specific ceremonial items. Red shell necklaces called solava, they always traveled clockwise from island to island, and white shell armbands, the mwali, always traveled counterclockwise. You couldn't bargain for them, they were gifts, which created this powerful social obligation to give a gift of equal value back at some point. So what on earth was the point of all that? For Malinowski, this was the perfect proof of his theory. See, the kula wasn't about the trinkets at all. It was about the functions it served for the individual. The magic rituals they performed gave the sailors psychological confidence for their journeys. The gift exchange itself built social trust between tribes, which then allowed for the real trade of essential goods, like food and tools, to happen on the side. And on a personal level, being a successful kula trader brought a man incredible prestige. It all came back to serving individual human needs. But this is where the clash really begins. Another brilliant thinker, A.R. Radcliffe Brown, he looked at Malinowski's work and pretty much said, "You're missing the entire point." For him, the individual was not the center of the universe. And right here, this is the heart of the clash. Malinowski was all about how culture serves the psychological and biological needs of the individual. But Radcliffe Brown, he argued that customs exist to maintain the social structure, the overall order and stability of the society itself. The individual, in his view, is secondary. Radcliffe Brown's key example for this came from the Andaman Islands, where he saw this very peculiar ritual that, at first, seems really emotional and personal: ceremonial weeping. So, picture this. Two friends who haven't seen each other in a really long time finally meet up. But instead of just a happy hello, they sit down, they embrace, and they weep together in this formal, almost scripted way. They did the same thing at peacemaking ceremonies and funerals. So Radcliffe Brown asked, what's the social function going on here? And this was Radcliffe Brown's big insight. The weeping wasn't just about what the individuals were feeling inside, it was a social mechanism. The shared ritual was a way to renew a bond that had been weakened by time apart or broken by a conflict. Its real function was to stitch the social fabric back together, to maintain the group's solidarity. The priority wasn't the individual's feelings, it was the health of the social structure as a whole. So who was right? Well, this debate raged for decades, and while you don't see as many pure functionalists around today, its legacy is absolutely enormous. It completely shaped how we think about society, even now. Later thinkers, like Robert Merton, came along and added these really crucial new layers. He gave us the idea of manifest and latent functions. So a rain dance, for instance, has a manifest, or obvious function of trying to make it rain, but its latent or hidden function might actually be to bring the whole community together and reinforce their social bonds during a stressful drought. Of course, the theory isn't perfect, not by a long shot. Critics point out this major blind spot. By focusing so much on stability, functionalism has a really hard time explaining social change or conflict. And, if you argue that everything has a positive function, it can start to sound like you're just justifying the way things are, even when it might be unfair. Which brings us right back to that core debate and leaves us with a final question for you to think about. When you look at all the institutions around you, your job, the government, the media, what do you think their primary function is? Are they there to serve the needs of you, the individual, like Malinowski argued? Or are they really there to maintain the structure of society itself, just like Radcliffe Brown insisted? The answer might just change how you see everything around you.